let's talk about all the books I've been reading. Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I have lots of books here to talk about that I've been reading over the past week. And I have just been having a grand old time reading lots of great books. So I want to talk to you about those today. The first thing I want to talk about though are my picture books, because I checked out 3 newly released picture books from my library, and I wanted to mention those too, just in case you're interested, because I love picture books. A couple of weeks ago I mentioned Hot Dog, which was the Caldecott winner, and so after I checked that one out, I placed a hold on several others, and so here are the ones that I also was interested in that were published in 2022. The first one is called The Great Zappino, and this is it's like a black and white pencil drawing book. It's all illustrated in black and white, and it looks like pencil drawings. I really enjoyed this one. It's a cute little book. I like the size of this one, the way it's long like that, and I also thought it was a cute little story, but this is what the illustrations look like in it. It starts out with these Great Zappino, and he's at the circus, and he climbs up to dive into the crowd at the circus, and things go from there. So it has a fun twist at the end of this one that I enjoyed. The next one is Farmhouse by Sophie Blackall. Again, it was published in 2022. If you enjoy The Little House, it reminds me of that book, that classic picture book, The Little House, where the house is sort of neglected and then moved somewhere else. I don't know if you remember that picture book. I'll put a picture if I think about it. But this sort of reminded me of that, but this one is about a farmhouse and the people that live in it and how they grow up there. Beautiful illustrations in this one. Lots of beautiful pictures of details from the inside of the house, as well as just beautiful pictures of the countryside. Like there's a picture of them outside farming. It's beautiful. There's lots of beautiful pictures in this one. I highly recommend that one. But my favorite picture book that I picked up this past week, and this is an all-time favorite now. I'm going to buy me a copy of this picture book because I love it so much. It's called Night Owl by Christopher Denise, and I noticed that it was actually nominated for the Caldecott as well, but Hot Dog won, and I think this should have won. No, I understand why Hot Dog won. I do, because the way that Hot Dog is presented in the panels, the vivid colors that they used, I do love Hot Dog in the illustrations, and you know, Caldecott's for the illustrations, but I love this book. I absolutely love it, and I highly recommend Night Owl. It's about this little owl who dreams of becoming a knight, and one day all the knights start mysteriously disappearing, and so he applies to become a knight, and they take him because all the knights have started disappearing. It's about his training. He trains, and well, it was really cute with the training because, you know, he has trouble holding the sword and the shield. He wants to take naps during the training because, you know, it's during the daytime. But then they find the perfect job for the owl, and I just love this picture. It's just precious. It says, Owl was assigned to the night watch. He was very good at his job. And I just thought that was the sweetest thing in the world. And I just love this book. It goes on to have a sweet little ending, and it's just precious. I highly recommend Night Owl. That is a new favorite, and I will be picking up my own copy of that picture book. And then I read The Murder at the Vicarage by Agatha Christie. Now this is a bind-up of Sleep and Murder and The Murder at the Vicarage. Murder at the Vicarage is her first case, and Sleep and Murder is her last. I don't know why they have them upside down. Anyway, The Murder at the Vicarage is the first Miss Marple. It was published in 1930, and I loved it. I think Miss Marple's going to be a favorite for me. I love Hercule Poirot and Tommy and Tuppence, but so far, I have loved every Miss Marple. They are just wonderful, and they just suit my taste for what I'm looking for in a mystery. I love the way she interacts with the people around her, and she does that so well in this one. It's great. She's in this one a lot, because you know, in some of them she kind of shows up at the beginning and at the end. In this one, she's all the way through it. But in this one, she lives next door to the vicarage. And another thing I loved about this particular one was it's told from the vicar's perspective. And he's a hoot too. The way he describes the people in the village is great as well. I liked his personality mixed with Miss Marple and the way she interacted. And, you know, she's in her garden next door to the vicarage. And the murder, of course, takes place here, so she knows what's going on. She is well aware, as she's gardening, who's going in and out of the vicarage. So I really enjoyed this one, and I highly recommend it if you enjoy Agatha Christie and those type mysteries. And then I read Listening Valley by D.E. Stevenson. I read this for the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. I read a book in January that had a red-orange cover. And so for February, our prompt was to find a cover that had a complementary color to that one. And this blue is a complementary color to that red-orange. So it was perfect. But I love D.E. Stevenson's writing. This one was published in 1944. This one is set during World War II, and I really enjoyed the storytelling in this one, just like every other D.E. Stevenson I've read. She has a way of creating a story where you want to live there. It's heartwarming. The way that she describes the setting makes you want to live in the area. The way she describes the interesting characters makes you want them to be your neighbors. That's how I feel in every D.E. Stevenson I've read so far. Now, I've read several. I've read a handful, and every one of them make me feel that way. So I really enjoy her writing. And this one is about a girl named Tanya, and we go through her life. It's not long, but you pretty much grow up with Tanya in this story. There is some romance in this one, and I enjoyed that too. And I discovered as I was reading this is the type of romance I like. I'll say sometimes I don't read romance, but I do read romance. It just depends on how it's presented. And the way that it's presented here, it just happened naturally in the story. And I like that about it. And I don't want to say too much because in the middle of the story, something romantic happens. And I love the way that D.E. Stevenson told that part of the story. I just really loved it. So yes, the way that she tells, if you've ever read this, the way that this romance is described is how I like a romance in my stories. So I highly recommend this one if you enjoy beautiful descriptions of the countryside and the village life, those kinds of stories, heartwarming. You'll love D.E. Stevenson's writing. This was a fun one, and I can't wait to pick up another D.E. Stevenson. Now we're going to fast forward to a recently published book. I know I read a lot of vintage and classics, and I love those books. That's what I mostly read, but I'm trying to incorporate recently published books. And so I have been reading Susan Meissner, and my sort of rule about favorites is to read at least 3 books by an author. And if I enjoy all 3 books, then they become favorite authors. And so it's official. Susan Meissner is now a favorite because this is my 3rd Susan Meissner, and I've loved every one of her books. So I can't wait to read more by Susan Meissner. This book is As Bright as Heaven, and it was published in 2018. But it's historical fiction. So it's set in 1918 in Philadelphia at the beginning of the Spanish flu. Now, I will say I'm glad that I picked this up just because it was Susan Meissner and not based on the premise, because if I would have known it was about the Spanish flu, I would have been hesitant, because right now, after all that we've been through over the past few years, I don't want to read about that kind of thing. But I'm glad I read it because, again, it was fantastic. At the beginning of the story, we meet Pauline, who has just lost her son, and we learn about her family and her husband. And the story, what I really loved about the story was every chapter is told from a different perspective. So we have one chapter that is written by Pauline as the mother, and then we have several chapters, each chapter written by one of her daughters, as they are, going through the story as well. So I love the different perspectives because we're getting perspectives from different ages. And it was very interesting the way the story was told that way. So the family moves to Philadelphia in 1918 to live with an uncle who is going to train the dad, the father of this family, how to run the funeral home. So the house so there's a house, and inside the house is the funeral home, the embalming, everything goes on in this house. So they've the uncle has the family sort of separated in the house from the funeral business, but it's going to get tangled all up, of course. So that part was morbid. I will say at the beginning of the story, after a few chapters, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to read this. I almost DNF'd it because I thought, this is all about death and funeral homes. So I wasn't sure. I mean, it's not detailed in the embalming process, but there's dead bodies. You know what I mean? So I was uncomfortable to begin with, but the way that she told the story, I wanted to know what was going on, and I kept reading, and I found it to be very interesting. So she handled that well. Again, I love that every chapter was a different perspective of the different people living in this house with a funeral home, and how they were coping with the Spanish flu and death all around them. So that was very interesting. This is a book about death. That is the main theme of this story. When I was writing my thoughts down in my reading journal, I wrote, it was morbid but beautiful at the same time. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but that's how I felt when I finished it. It is morbid. It is all surrounding death and just devastating. It is horrific. But then in the midst of that, it's a beautiful story celebrating life. And that's what I loved about it, was by the end of this, when I finished it, I felt encouraged, I felt hopeful, and I felt like we were celebrating life, even though, we do deal with death. So I hope I'm making sense with that. I found it to be a beautiful story, but it was hard to read. It was hard to read, but beautiful at the same time. If that makes any sense at all. I will be picking up more Susan Meisner. If you've read a Susan Meisner, let me know in the comments, because I do want to pick up more of her work. And those are the books that I have read this past week. I'm looking forward to March. I have one more book that I need to finish, and another book that I have finished that I'm going to be posting a review about soon. So I can't wait to talk about it because it was a 5-star read for me. So I have my book review on that one, and then I'm finishing up a book today, and then it's all about March Mystery Madness and Middle Grade March. And I have already posted my TBRs for both of those challenges. I'll leave it in the cards and in the description box below in case you're interested in that as well. What have you been reading? Have you read any of these? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.